Hello, welcome to Microsoft Certified Professional Developer 4.0 with ASP.NET and C Sharp. The content exam focus is 70-515, and the content is owned and created by Ravi Nanganuri, Microsoft MVP.NET Videos.net. So video number 5, part B here, we're going to talk about globalization. Globalization fundamentals are a part of the exam 70-515 fundamentals. The globalization is all about building world-ready applications. So if you need to support multiple cultures, multiple languages, you need to understand globalization. Much of the framework for this is built into ASP.NET. Settings exist on the server and the client side. We'll look at this. This helps determine the culture setting and which culture we're going to use for your ASP.NET applications. And the culture definition itself, it consists of not only a language but a region as well. You can imagine a language being spoke such as French that's spoken in Canada as well as France. So there could be various different nuances and dialects depending on the region you're in. So you can get that granular here. You can define a culture for the entire app, or it could be at the page level itself. You could even use resource files to get more granular than that. And you can let the browser dictate the culture via the auto setting in the page directive itself. So whatever browser setting somebody was using, it could use that particular culture. And then again, via resource files, we could even go more granular down at the control level and affect things with that. We'll show a quick example of that as well. I'm going to jump over to the image here. I have a demo set up. I've got a blank web application at this point. I'm going to simply start by driving a bit of this with master pages. So see our video series in Visual Studio 2008 around more information around master pages, which help you template your application with a common look and feel and navigation experience here. But all I did was right click and add a master page, and then we're going to add a page called a content page, which is simply a web form here that I'm going to actually use to consume the master page itself. So master pages are very flexible, very powerful. You can use those when you are wanting to provide that common look and feel experience. Again, see our earlier video series for more information around those. So wiring this content page up to the master page itself is not difficult. You notice the master page in the HTML here, you've got a content placeholder. I'm going to call this the main area. And this is where my content page, and again, it could be many content pages on this web app, can override certain areas of this form and basically provide their own content. I'm also going to add another content that's going to kind of be my common look and feel here, and this is simply going to be my footer region where I'm going to place a message here. And you know, contrary to what you have to worry about with like user controls, master pages, you don't have to worry about like opening and ending tags for like HTML, this type of stuff. Notice if in the content page it's actually going to use this footer, which is just a simple example here. I'm just going to plug in master page file equals, and then I can just simply pick the master page here that's available in my solution. I also could have browsed for it. Now the thing you're going to want to do for your the web form here, the difference here is I'm going to just delete all this other HTML. I don't need any of that when I'm going to use a page that's going to consume or use a master page, and it was technically called a content page. I'm going to provide the content placeholder main here, and notice just right away I get that footer text down here. And that could have been a very complicated navigation control, common logo, image. Those type of stuff make great candidates to place in master pages, and that way you have the common theme throughout your entire web application. I'm going to plug in a button and a calendar control to demonstrate the globalization techniques here in the main content area. And you see that I have this here. I just have a hello button here, as well as the master page definition text down here, and then the calendar control here. So mainly when I'm working with my content pages here, I can just be updating the content area as I normally would. If I do want to make a change to the master page itself, I can make it in the master page directly here. And you can imagine where I've got dozens or even more than that possibly pages. When I want to make one change here on the master page side, all my content pages are going to get that. One thing to note is when design view here, although you get the benefits of seeing this, which makes this very nice, compared to something like user controls. This down here, I'm going to have to rebuild the solution every time I make a change, or rebuild the project every time I make a change to the master page to see the update automatically in design view. Okay, so I've got a calendar and a button and a simple footer down here, so this is good enough. So when we're using globalization, notice right now my calendar is just showing me English. One of the settings that we're going to have is in the browser itself. So the user's browser, depending what they're using, are going to have various language settings. If you do a Tools Internet Options here, I happen to be in Internet Explorer 8. Notice that you've got language settings. English here, I can change this to French. Various, again, culture plus region. So this would be French in France. There would have been a French Canadian, and etc. So I'll move that to the top there. I'll click OK. Now this is not yet enough. If I just refresh the page at this point, the calendar is still displaying English dates, English text, this type of stuff. Many .NET controls, such as the calendar control, have flexibility and globalization built directly into them, or globalization ready, we'll say, built directly into them. Notice I'm going to have to make a change though here. I'm going to go down to the page level itself, and I'm going to set the UI culture, which that'll actually affect the resource files, which we'll get to in a moment. And the culture, I've set both of those properties to auto. And what this is saying is, okay, whatever the user's browser setting is, let's automatically use that. So if it's French, if it's Spanish, let's use those culture settings, and therefore have, we ought to be able to see when I rerun the application here. Notice my calendar is now in French. Now these calendars, depending on the actual culture we're using, can be drastically different look in the way they look and feel. Notice that my button text here, Hello Globalization, is still the same as is my label here coming from my master control. So if I'm not using built-in controls that are using the globalization, and I've got some hard-coded text like on my button and stuff, we'll show how to change that in a minute. But at this point, I'm just affecting the one page. And again, you could have set that in the web config, have that affect the entire application. I'm going to go to the code behind for my page, which right now I don't have any code at all. And just by using system.globalization, you also have programmatic access here to the culture object. So you could have your users choose which culture setting they want, and not use that auto setting on the browser, but rather have them explicitly choose what they want. And it can all be accessed programmatically. So the same benefits here. I just response.write out here to the screen from the culture object what particular language we happen to be using at this time. So it's very flexible. This is a large topic. You have a lot of flexibility when using globalization, and there's several techniques you could choose from. But at a minimum, I'm not done much here. I've already got some benefits of globalization. If I need to display a currency or perhaps a calendar or dates, this type of stuff in another culture, you can see kind of how easy this is to build out. Now notice when I go to Tools, Generate Local Resources from Design View for this specific page, you get something called the Resources file, which is a .resx file. And I've just got this for the specific page at this point, my demo globalization. I could have added that to a global folder. But notice if I go look at the code behind my file now for my page I'm using, I've got some metadata here, the meta resource key. That got added. And what you can do here is you can dig in at the control level and control the globalization and localization for your application. So you notice that when I double click that resx file, you get this design time editor here, and like the text property of the button, I could type in something like bonjour here, and we could simply rerun the application, and now we're affecting an effect binding to the various controls. And I'll go ahead and click the ASPX file here that's doing our demo. And you notice again, I've got the bonjour button here. I also have the French calendar. So we can get down to the control level, and I left the world ready applications in English. So you've got a lot of flexibility. You don't have to change all the properties, etc. when you are doing your globalization techniques. Now, if you're going to support multiple languages and you're going to want to work with the controls like this, you're going to want to create these local resource files. You're going to want to name these appropriately. So that would be more like named .fr-fr for the culture and region setting there. And you want to create one of these for each. So if I had one for Spanish, or I had one for German, or whatever language I chose to use, I would have a resx file for each of those. And then again, we could leverage those appropriately. So when you're using the globalization techniques, remember, you've got several techniques. You could add this like at a global or local level. Notice again, if I just add the global resources folder, it'd be as simple as plucking those resource files and putting them in there, and then they wouldn't be at specific page level anymore. We also used page directive attributes to drive this, but we certainly could also use the web config file down here to do the same thing. And what you'd expect is this going to affect the entire application. Now, if you're wondering, the web config for the entire .NET framework on your machines has empty settings for these culture and UI culture if you would go look at that. And again, the UI culture affecting the resx settings, and the culture being what we're using when we're like using the browser and such. So I encourage you to explore globalization further. If you need to ready world your applications, much of the stuff is built into the .NET framework, ASP.NET. You still have some manual work to do. There are various other tools that can help you do translations, this type of stuff.